Hello, my name is Tracey Wolfman and welcome to SCAN. I am delighted to have our guest speaker here today, Dr. Sarah Shimemi. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Just so you know, our viewers are typically, they're going to be in Monmouth and Ocean counties, so they're going to be tuning in to us today. And just to let everyone know, I am your host, Tracey Wolfman. I am the president and board member at SCAN New Jersey. I'm a board member of Alzheimer's New Jersey and the owner of We Care Adult Daycare located in Middletown, New Jersey. And hopefully today's session here will bring us all some enlightenment from Dr. Shimemi and help us guide these uncharted territories as we have, right? Dr. Sarah Shimemi is a licensed clinical psychologist in both New York and New Jersey, and currently works in a subacute rehabilitation and nursing facility, as well as a private practice setting. Her specialty is working with the older adult population, treating complex trauma in the adolescent population, and perinatal mood and anxiety disorder. Dr. Shimemi obtained a bachelor's degree in psychology at the University of Delaware, as well as a master's in psychology from Boston University. Working as a therapist in the residential center and educated teenage males with both criminal offenses as well as trauma motivated Dr. Shimemi to understand this population in greater depth. Dr. Shimemi subsequently pursued a doctoral degree and attended LaSalle University, where she earned both a master's and a doctoral degree in clinical psychology. A lot of education there.
Yes, it
Dr.
is.
Shimemi works for Senior Care Therapy and has implemented clinical services since 2016 at Imperial Healthcare Rehab and Nursing Center, as well as multiple other facilities across New Jersey. Well, that's a lot of education, so hopefully you can fix us all today, right?
Absolutely.
And you work with the sweetest, most dearest Chris Brown over there at Imperial Healthcare,
Yes.
who I think is a gem.
She really is a gem. She
Yes.
really is. She's a wonderful
So anybody
person.
looking for subacute rehab, Imperial Healthcare, just a little plug there for you. Anyway, tell us, Dr. Shimemi,
Yes.
how have you seen struggles that you're noticing in the facilities of our adult population since the pandemic? And we're talking about adults older, 55 plus. We're all getting, 55 plus isn't called old now.
Yes.
Scary.
Yes. 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 I can imagine. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. Mainly when we get to this point in our life, what we love to think of in some of these facilities, which I learned very early on in my work, is that these places are places that we would hope to go and live out the best, parts of our years, not necessarily just wait. So the pandemic, unfortunately, has significantly interfered with the living out part. A lot of older
Right.
folks, they are at these places and they're hustling and they're bustling and there's activities and there's, at a lot of my facilities, there's happy hour and there's so many things and people are out and about. And unfortunately, having to isolate in the rooms has really, really caused an increase in what we would typically see in that population for mental health.
Right. So I've spent, most of my career working with this population also.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
what do? We push them to be active, to be moving,
Absolutely.
to stay socializing. Yes. And everything that we have put in their brains is how you're going to stay younger and fit was completely taken away.
Right. Right. And if you think about it, most often we would hope that they would want to be at some of these places, but oftentimes these older folks do not want to. Excuse me, sorry
That's
about
okay.
that technical malfunction. I apologize.
No
Oftentimes these older folks, their independence does feel like it was taken away. They do feel like they've lost some of their autonomy due to their limitations. So when you're taking away that independence within the facility, they then feel devastated. They feel trapped. They feel, quote, prison. Even though the facilities are wonderful in their support, they already felt like that. So it's kind of a double whammy a bit.
It is a double whammy. And I think, you know, there was really no plan in place for this ever to
No.
occur, which was half the problem. I have to tell you, I've been very impressed with facilities across the board, how they
Yes.
whipped things into shape and figured out a way to provide services, activities, interaction, and all
Yes.
of this during this pandemic. It's really been so heartwarming to see that being done.
Absolutely.
It did take a while, though, don't you agree? I mean, it took a
Yes.
while to get things going, and so they were isolated for a long time. And also, I mean, we're talking about people in facilities, but, you know, as general, the people living independently were also isolated, no matter, you know, what we think. They're not in a facility, but they were still isolated.
Oh, 100%, 100%. I do
So,
think that it rolled out slowly. And I think, unfortunately, you know, facilities scrambled, communities scrambled. You know, over
mhm,
time, we saw even things that made such a difference, like being able to go to the grocery store earlier or Walmart earlier to protect some of this older population. In the facilities in particular, first and foremost, safety was of importance. Mental health, of course, obviously, as well as all of this isolation led to the increased rates in depression and anxiety. What I can tell you, though, it's a fabulous thing. You know, I can tell you at Imperial in particular and the other facilities I work at, they actually have a channel on their TV where activities is doing 24/7, well, maybe not 24/7, activities constantly. They're coming on, there's music playing, there's happy hour in the courtyard so everybody can look out their windows. There's bingo in the rooms every week at a certain time. Staff will come around with the bingo boards and sit with the residents. It's amazing. It really is.
that is wonderful to hear,
Yes,
because
yes,
they need that. They
they
need
do.
some kind of self-worth, self-promotion.
Yes,
You know, it's all.
absolutely.
Um, how do you feel it impacted the particular population the most? So we know they've all been impacted, but what
Yes.
stands out particularly to you as a problem?
You mean within the facilities, outside, or both?
I think just how it's impacted the population the
The older
most.
adult population.
Yeah,
Yeah. You know, I think a couple things. I think number one, when you have these rates of depression and anxiety already existing from some of the natural things that come along with the, you know, getting older, such as end of
right.
life issues, watching friends pass, your family's kind of moved away, they're busy or they're not around as much, just, you know, some of the cognitive impairments that come along with that. You then have this feeling where if you're already depressed, there's isolation is one of the symptoms of depression as it is. Now, when you add this on top of it, again, it's that double whammy we're talking about. If you
Right.
have anxiety or say, you know, trauma is one of my specialties. So, you know, one of the tenets of trauma is that after these events happen, the world is no longer unsafe. So now you're working with, and there's a lot of trauma in some of these facilities as well, from younger years or marriages or whatever it may be. And you're now having to say, you know, one of the focuses in therapy would be, okay, well, you're going to disconfirm that belief that the world is unsafe, but truly right now
Right.
it is. And so that also exacerbates that anxiety and that fear of going out. I
Mm,
think at that point in our lives, we are also so excited to be around family and watch our
yes.
children and our grandchildren and even great grandchildren. Not being able to physically touch or see has been devastating. I have had many residents tell me, I just want to hug my son. And it's
Right.
devastating. That is such a healing thing for this, for all of us, right? But for
Human touch.
definitely, yes, it's very healing and it's very necessary for thriving. You know, just a hug, a visit can help someone eat better, sleep better.
Right. Exactly. And I don't think people realize the impact of that.
Right.
So using the term, and I just want to reflect back on this so our
Yes.
viewers know. So using the word trauma, you know, a
Yes.
lot of people think of trauma, you know, somebody's in an automobile accident, they have
Right.
trauma, they've seen something. But I think, and you verified, the way that you're explaining
Yes.
trauma is a different perspective. And it's a trauma because of the occurrence of the pandemic. Am I correct in saying that?
Well, it can be both. Let's say you have someone with underlying trauma, say a car accident, say some even sexual trauma or physical or emotional abuse in their childhood, or even, as we know, physical ailments, hospitalizations,
Right.
like scary, scary things like that can cause trauma. I will say sometimes, the older adult population sees losing, we don't think of the loss, like we see as they're going to transition to this safe space in a facility and it's wonderfully supportive, but to them it's a loss, and loss can be trauma. So you're talking about
Exactly.
then adding on the pandemic where you now have trauma on top of trauma. And it, as a clinician, to say to this person, the world is okay. Well, it's really not actually. It's hard to disconfirm that. Right. And so it's
And
kind of it's trauma from a couple perspective. Could be childhood trauma. And then on top of that, the pandemic or the loss of independence due to their limitations and having to be in a facility.
right. And I think for our viewers, they need to realize that they all had trauma, whether they had no
Yes.
pre-existing trauma or not.
Correct. Yes.
So now this is a trauma that someone like yourself can help them get through.
Yes. Yes.
So
I hope so.
yes,
I hope so. We try.
because
We
I
definitely
think
try.
this is what, we all need to focus on now, because I don't
Yes.
think people, there's a group that's been very successful and, having their groceries delivered and
Right.
going on TV and trying to figure out how to do Zoom with their family and
Right.
their communication. But then there's those that weren't very successful with that and they've been
Correct.
self-isolated. So it's a whole big thing.
It is.
Hopefully we are on the uprise of all of this. We've learned
I
from
hope
it
so.
and we can help those that need us the most right now and
Yes.
start healing is what
Yes.
we hope for. Dr. Shimemi, what
Yes.
do you think some of the symptoms that you've seen most common emerge besides the typical ones that we just spoke about, like new ailments that people might
Mhm.
not think about?
Yeah,
Or
absolutely.
your pre-existing ones, however you have seen it.
Right. Yeah. I think there's a general feeling of, in general, we see an increase in anxiety and depression, right? But what comes with
Right.
that under the umbrella of depression is this overall dysphoric feeling, like the sadness, that sadness to your core, the irritability, the insomnia, the increase or decrease in appetite, even suicidal thoughts. Feeling trapped can make anybody feel without that option. Unfortunately, some of these folks have been in their room, and that room, though beautiful, is a tiny space. So if any of us can imagine, some of us can't stand being in our house with our
Right.
families a little bit, right?
Right.
You got a lot of chaos, but every day, all day, despite the activities, and some are in rooms with two other people, some have private rooms, but the feeling of not being able to get out can then lead to also increased panic. So, we are seeing an increase in suicidal thoughts. We're seeing an increase for sure in panic attacks, that feeling of being trapped, not even able to go out and smoke. Of course, we allow them, it's part of their rights to be able to go out and smoke, but that's
Right.
also their social time. So now they're dealing with things like nicotine withdrawal on top of feeling trapped and not being able to go. These are things that don't seem so little, but when all day, every day, I'm chatting like, what coping skills? Let's talk about some activities you're doing. I'm watching TV, or, I'm doing crossword puzzles, but it's all day, every day. So
Right.
definitely.
So some of those symptoms to think about being in those four walls, but I think it's been tough. And hopefully people, as they reemerge, can work on all of these. We're going to take a
Absolutely.
quick commercial break, and then we're going to come back with some more great information from Dr. Shimemi here,
Wonderful.
who is
Sounds
our
good.
licensed clinical psychologist. And we will be delighted to hear some more information from you.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Take it from me, living with diabetes is no easy task, but I learned how to manage my health condition, and so can you. The Diabetes Self-Management Program is a 6-week self-management workshop created by Stanford University. The program provides you with proven strategies to manage your diabetes and reclaim your life. You will join an interactive and mutually supportive workshop whose success builds confidence to effectively manage your diabetes and allows you to maintain an active lifestyle. See how proper nutrition, exercise, and medication management help you increase your energy, manage side effects, and keep you feeling in control. You will not only receive a copy of this book, but you will get guidance and support from others like you living with diabetes.
The Diabetes Self-Management Workshop meets once a week for 6 weeks. This innovative workshop is offered to all Monmouth County residents. Call the number on your screen to register or get additional information at scannj.org.
And welcome back to Welcome to Scan. We are here with Dr. Sarah Shimemi, who is a licensed clinical psychologist in both New York and New Jersey. So welcome back, Dr. Scimeme.
Thank you. Thank you.
So continuing on with this conversation here, which has been, I hope, very enlightening for our viewers in Monmouth and Ocean County that are members of SCAN and who tune in. So we talked about the trauma, the impact of the pandemic, the 4 walls closing in, people want to emerge from those 4 walls and all of that, and some of the impacts and diagnosis that you've seen emerge.
Yes. Yes.
So now we're past all that. We had our isolation, our trauma, our diagnosis, and now we are in our healing phase, right?
Yes. Yes, absolutely.
So referring back to the facilities, how have the facilities pulled together to support these residents? Because I think that's one of the most wonderful things that has occurred. And I don't think these facilities really got enough credit.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, I've seen so many beautiful things along also to the residents supporting each other, which is beautiful, which I'll get to. Yes, which warms my heart and makes me tear up. But, you know, these workers are the nurses, the aides, the administrators are working around the clock to try to provide a semblance of new normal with some of these residents. You know, like I mentioned before, the activities department has really stepped up. You know, there's a schedule every day. I'm not sure if you're aware, there's every resident in their room has a schedule of what's going on from minute to minute. There's like the coffee klats. I know at Imperial there's coffee klats and there's Bigel and there's this and that. And what they'll do now is they'll come around to the rooms in particular. Every day, I know again, at Imperial, they have this, the perk of the week or perk of the day where it discusses. Yes, actually,
I like that.
Yes, there's a crossword puzzle or a word find on the back, and on the front there's what happened today in history or national such and such day and little fun facts, and it's just a little something to look forward to break up the day. There's activities.
Stimulate the brain also.
Yes, absolutely. They're handing out things. They're going around with carts filled with goodies.
Nice.
You know, just making sure, and you're really trying to keep them connected any way that they can. And during the severe isolation, as much as we could, there was video calls, and I know we'll probably get to that as well, but as much as they could connect them to their families, they did. So any kind of video conferencing, FaceTime, all the rooms are labeled if they're ground floor, who's there, so that the families can come up and visit, and then they'll call on the phone through the windows. It's not the same, but it's something, just being able to see their families. Yeah.
Because they need that connection.
I
know some of the facilities were videotaping Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts coming to the outside the window and doing all these things. Any in particular activities for our viewers in case they want to do it while they're at home that you've seen that you could self-do?
I'm trying to think. You know, I actually did hear of, and I've had the pleasure of having a friend of mine who's a teacher have her class write letters. I think it was an English class, write letters, and we distributed them. And just to get some encouragement, to get a smile, to get a picture, even daycare is drawing pictures. You know,
sending them.
Yes, to sending.
Because then it's a communication and it's something to look forward to when that letter arrives at the facility.
Absolutely. Who doesn't like a good letter or package? Even care packages with things like that, you know? It's a wonderful thing to be able to do that, to get like a, hey, keep going. And the facilities themselves need that as well. I've seen a lot of things hung up across like, thank you so much for all that you do, because these healthcare workers are tired to the bone, and they're, you know, on the front lines, right? We all know that, you know, we discussed, but just to see it firsthand, they're exhausted and they're scared, you know, especially before the vaccines came out.
Yes, it's been a very long haul on the staff who has the cheerleader, and some of them had to sacrifice their own families to stay isolated. Anything stand out on how some of the residents, any particular story, how the residents supported each other? I mean, we know the staff were cheerleaders, no matter how much they were exhausted, they just kept going. But I
Yes.
like that you you saw resident support amongst each other.
I
Anything in
do.
particular?
So some of the residents call each other every day, like room to room. And, some of them call to check in about what's happening, when are we going to open up, when are activities going to resume. Some call to just say hi. There's kind of conversations going sometimes across the hallways, just whatever they can do to kind of cheer each other on. Because they're all in the same boat. Nobody understands more
Right.
than your peer, your fellow resident who's struggling. And it's
Right.
heartwarming, like, oh, such and such called me today. I'm like, oh, that's fabulous.
Right, like people living independently, maybe they
Yeah.
yelled across the way in
Right. Yes.
senior
Yes.
housing. I don't know, but that would be really good, right?
Absolutely.
So how have families of residents been impacted? Now, do you do counseling for them also? Or you just see the residents?
So no, we actually, during the pandemic, my company, Senior Care Therapy, we offered across the board family therapy. We did, because we did telehealth as much as we could. Those of us who could go in went in. Those of us who could
Mhm.
not, my company hired technicians to go in with the iPads to do. So I did a lot of evaluations and sessions through the iPad, and also we were able to call the families too and really check on them. I mean, if you think about it, it's devastating. Some of these folks are living out it's horrible, the last years or days of their lives in the facilities, and with no support on hand, and they're having to spend those last days alone. It's very sad. So we did offer, my company did, and I'm sure that others did as well, the family therapy, checking in with the families. There's definitely an increased anxiety in the families. Like, they don't know what's going on. They can't physically see their family member to know, are you okay or not? And if we think about, some of the presenting medical problems, there's a lot of cognitive impairments as you look at the range of dementia. There is a lot of hearing and vision difficulties where they're not able to pick up the phone. So the anxiety definitely increased with family members, obviously, as they passed and expired and lived out their last couple days alone. It's devastating for the families to not be able to be there to hold the hands. Thankfully, some of that is lifted. If I see a resident on hospice, I do see the family gathered, which is wonderful.
That is wonderful.
Absolutely.
Now, did the families, I mean, I don't think anybody knew in the beginning that they were going to be cut off from seeing their loved one.
Right.
So how was that transition? Like, did you have hostility? Did you have yes, I know?
That's a great question. I don't know if I could speak fully to it, because the social workers, who again are amazing in some of these facilities, they're wonderful. Right. They dealt more so as the liaison between the facility and the families. I jumped in more so for, assistance with the struggles with their adjustment on their end. I imagine there was a range, but I think most people generally want what is best for themselves and their family. Because
yes.
Of course, if you have like a 90-year-old resident, well, generally their child's going to be somewhere in between 60 and 65 as well, and at risk. And knowing how much this unfortunately flooded the facilities, I think everyone had to protect themselves. I don't know hostility. I think frustration. Definitely a lot of depression and sadness on their end as well, but I hadn't heard hostility per se. I think we all kind of got it, but I could be wrong, but that's just from my experience.
Well, there was one particular article that was floating around on the internet that this woman wanted to see her husband so bad that she actually got a job, applied for it, and got it in the kitchen of the nursing home.
Yeah. Yes.
So, and to me, that was such a heartwarming story, because she was going to great. I mean, she was like 80 years old.
Yeah. That's and I've seen people get jobs as companions. so many of these folks would
there.
love to just have somebody. I think I'm not even sure what the requirements are, but just that's what it says on the name tag, companion, and they're able
Right.
to just sit. Their job isn't medical, but literally to keep someone company. I mean, I've eaten lunch with residents. I've fed residents when necessary, just to keep them company. Like, let's watch Gunsmoke together.
Right.
I'll do that. They love
Because
some of
you're
those
another
shows.
person and I can talk
Yes,
to.
absolutely, absolutely.
Well, it's just been wonderful to kind of put it all out there, because I don't really know if people have realized the total impact
Yeah.
and the long-term effects that have occurred with that.
Yes, and the families too.
Oh, the families. I mean,
Yeah.
it's heartbreaking.
It's very heartbreaking.
So tell us about what your role specifically is in these facilities.
Sure, absolutely. So generally speaking, as a psychologist, I work with an LCSW as well for my company, and our role is to deliver and implement clinical services, including individual therapy as well as initial evaluations. When they come in, I do an assessment of background. I do a range of figuring out what's going on with their mood, their adjustment, assess for risk and things like that. And then we'll follow them for both individual therapy. I also do some family work. I've somehow done some couples work sometimes. And I also do, when necessary, some crisis work. If there is somebody that's really, really struggling and needs some de-escalation, we've run groups before at my agency. I've also, or my company, we've also done some interventions if people are really struggling and there needs to be some staff training. I love doing trainings. But that's the general range of clinical services. Oh, I can't hear you. I'm sorry.
Yeah, you're
Oh, there.
Everyone has been affected by this pandemic.
Yes, absolutely.
And no matter how free of trauma you think you may be, talking to somebody will definitely assist you.
Absolutely. And just looking generationally, sometimes there is a stigma with mental health. We see as the generations go on that as we get nearer to this day and age, it's very much accepted, but maybe so much when some of these folks were younger, it wasn't. But my message would be it's okay and it's necessary to get that support whatever way you can.
That's
it is
right.
Absolutely necessary.
So Dr. Sarah Shimemi is here with us on Welcome to SCAN. We thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
To our viewers, if there's any other topics that you would like us to speak about, please call us and let us know. Otherwise, until next time, thank you for watching Welcome to SCAN. I am here with Dr. Sarah Shimemi.
Thank you.
I'm your
Thank
host,
you so much.
Tracey Wolfman. And until next time.